In this video, I'm going to show you how to make gunpowder. And it's not one of those run-of-the-mill videos that you've seen before. It's going to be from start to finish. I'm going to take you through the whole process and show you how to make gunpowder. We'll show you what happens when you get done, and we'll talk about some of the different ways that you can use this in a post-apocalyptic world. So let's jump right into this. Gunpowder is an ancient mixture of charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter. These ingredients were first combined in China over 1,000 years ago. Since then, it has been used in fireworks, firearms, and other explosive devices. Gunpowder was used by soldiers in World War II to help launch themselves to safety when their tanks or other vehicles would be destroyed. And even today, people still use it for fireworks and hunting. But how exactly do you go about making it? Well, you're about to find out. The good news is that the materials that you need to make this are very easy to come by. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that you'll need is charcoal. Charcoal is made by burning wood in the absence of air. This allows the wood to burn very slowly, which produces a high-quality charcoal. To make charcoal, simply build a fire pit in your backyard or build up a pile of sticks and logs in a corner of your yard. Light one end of the pile on fire and let the wood smolder until it turns to ash. The best type of wood to use is hardwood such as hickory or oak. You'll notice that soft woods like pine don't produce nearly as much charcoal, and they tend to just burn up. Once the pile is thoroughly charred, you can dig through the ashes and sift out the charcoal. What you're left with should be a pile of charcoal that looks similar to this. Next, you'll need some sulfur. Sulfur is a naturally occurring element that can be found in volcanic areas. However, it can also be mined from rocks and minerals. One of the most common sources of sulfur is gypsum, which is a soft sulfate mineral composed of calcium sulfate dihydrates. Sulfur can also be extracted from other minerals such as barite, celestine, and galena. In addition to being mined, sulfur can also be produced as a byproduct of industrial processes such as petroleum refining and natural gas processing. Once you have your supply of sulfur, you'll need to grind it into a fine powder. This can be done using a mortar and pestle or a ball mill. If you don't have either of these tools, you can scrape the surface of a hard, flat rock with a piece of another rock to produce a fine sulfur powder. The last ingredient that you'll need is saltpeter, otherwise known as potassium nitrate. This chemical compound can be found in soils that are rich in nitrogen, and is often mined from underground deposits. Saltpeter can also be produced by evaporating natural water sources that contain high levels of nitrogen, such as seawater, urine, and animal manure. Urine in particular is a great source of nitrogen, and was commonly used by alchemists to produce saltpeter. Alchemists were known to collect urine from their friends and family members, and then evaporate it down to produce potassium nitrate. The process of making sallet from urine may sound gross, but it was actually quite common during the Middle Ages. At this time, urine was considered to be a valuable resource and was used for cleaning, preserving food, and even treating medical conditions. So if you happen to have access to some old urine, feel free to use that in your saltpeter production. However, modern urine is probably too diluted to be worth the effort. Now that you have your supplies ready, it's time to get to work. Be sure that you're reworking in a well-ventilated area because the dust from grinding your ingredients can be dangerous to breathe in. Start by combining the charcoal and sulfur in a 75-25 ratio. The charcoal will act as a fuel source while the sulfur will help to stabilize the mixture. Be sure to grind both of these ingredients into a fine powder before continuing. Next, add in your saltpeter, which will act as an oxidizer. The amount of saltpeter that you'll need will depend on the desired strength of your gunpowder. For a weaker gunpowder, use less saltpeter. For a stronger gunpowder, use more. A standard ratio for gunpowder is 75% charcoal, 15% sulfur, and 10% saltpeter. Be sure to mix the ingredients thoroughly to ensure an even distribution. Once your gunpowder is thoroughly mixed, you'll need to sift it through a fine mesh sieve. This will help to remove any large particles and make sure that your gunpowder is as fine as possible. This step is important because the smaller the particles are, the more surface area there is for the reaction to occur. Once your gunpowder is sifted, it's ready to be used. There are a variety of ways that you can use your homemade gunpowder, but let's focus on a few of the most common uses. The most obvious use for gunpowder is in firearms. If you have access to guns before the shotgun runs out of ammo, you can use your gunpowder to reload it. Simply measure out a level scoop of gunpowder and pour it into the gun's barrel. Be sure to use the correct amount of gunpowder for the caliber of the gun. Too much or too little can cause the gun to malfunction. Once the gunpowder is in the barrel, you can insert a bullet and then close the action. When fired, the gunpowder will combust and produce a large amount of pressure behind the bullet, causing it to be propelled forward out of the barrel. Another use for gunpowder is in fireworks. If you have access to some empty firework shells, you can use your gunpowder to fill them. This can be done by pouring the gunpowder into the shell and then igniting it with a red-hot musket ball. Be sure to use caution when doing this, as fireworks can be dangerous if not handled properly. In addition to its uses in fireworks and firearms, gunpowder was also used in World War II by soldiers to help launch themselves to safety when their tanks or other vehicles were destroyed. To do this, soldiers would place a small amount of gunpowder in a metal container, cover it with a cloth, and then place it under their vehicle. When the vehicle was destroyed, the explosion from the gunpowder would help to propel the soldier to safety. Now that you know how to make and use gunpowder, you may be wondering what happens if you accidentally ingest some. The answer is that it won't do anything. Gunpowder is not poisonous, but it can be dangerous if inhaled or ingested in large amounts. If you do ingest gunpowder, be sure to drink plenty of water and then induce vomiting. Now that you know how to make gunpowder, you're ready to add another important skill to your prepping repertoire. Gunpowder is an essential ingredient in many historical recipes, so knowing how to make it can be a valuable skill in a post-apocalyptic world. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and comment. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it, please turn on the notification bell and subscribe to Livuga. We'll let you know every time we come out with a new video. Stay safe.